Buenas noches. Good evening. Welcome. Gracias. Me llama Jennifer DeVere Brody, and it is my honor to serve as the faculty director of the Center for Comparative Studies in Race and Ethnicity at Stanford University. The center is Stanford's hub for innovative scholarship on race and ethnicity. Our mission is to advance a comparative, intersectional understanding of race and to promote racial justice through research and teaching. As an educator, a Black lesbian feminist, as a person, I am gratified for the work that I get to do through this venue. And I want to express my gratitude especially to Anne and Laura Kieve for their generous support of this annual lecture. Thank you. This event has become one of the key events of the year for us at CCSRE and at Stanford as a whole. And we're just thrilled this year to honor someone who embodies all of the ideals that we strive for, Ms. Dolores Huerta, who will be joining us in a moment. I want to remind you that this Monday is Martin Luther King Day, and Dolores, like Martin Luther King, has been an activist, a pacifist, an organizer, and someone who inspires us to say, "Si se puede." I also want to thank our many co-sponsors that are listed in the program, and a special shout out to my amazing, incredible CCSRE staff. Thank you so much. We wouldn't have over 1,000 responses in this full auditorium without their indefatigable work. I also want to thank tonight's interpreters, Alicia Benson and Maria Cruz, whom you saw a moment ago from Continental Interpreting. So for tonight's lecture, I also want to say that you can follow us on Facebook, where we'll be live streaming tonight's event, and also feel free to tweet at Stanford CCSRE. That's at Stanford CCSRE. And finally, I want to thank our compadres at KZSU, who are also live streaming this event and have it on the radio. That's our local radio station at Stanford. So thank you to those of you who are here. In a moment, I'm going to bring up one of my colleagues who will introduce tonight's esteemed guest. Ms. Huerta will speak and then participate in a conversation with the CCSRE founding director, in whose footsteps I strive to follow, Professor of History Al Camarillo. At the end of their dialogue, we're going to have time for a few questions, and to help us smooth that process, we ask that you write your question on a note card. You may have gotten one when you arrived, or if not, we'll have them passed out through the aisle. If you can just jot down your question in English or Spanish, we will take it and have time for questions at the end. And at the very conclusion of this evening, we'd like to welcome you on stage to take a photo with Ms. Huerta, if you would so desire. Okay, so now it's my very great pleasure to give you a little bit of sense for those of you who weren't able to see the documentary about Dolores' life called Dolores. It will be on PBS eventually, but we have just a short film about the incredible work that she does with the Dolores Huerta Foundation. So we're going to roll that, and then I will bring on Elvira Prieto.
The Dolores Huerta Foundation works with everyday people, low-income folks, immigrants, really teaching people that they have power, that they can be the change that they want to see in their communities, and we provide them the guidance and the coaching.
Well, the philosophy behind our work is not that we are going to go out there and do things for people. The idea is how to teach people to do things for themselves. They have the power, that they have the answers, they have the solutions to their problems, to their issues that they are going through, and that nobody is going to solve these issues for them.
Erika came one day knocking into our home and asking us for any concerns that we had. We mentioned to her that we wanted a park, felt that our community here already had plenty of houses. We needed something for our kids. All of us had a lot of small children, and they were constantly in the street or just here with the dirt. And she says, well, I can help you with that. And I'm like, well, how can you help me? And she goes, oh, I can give you the directions and everything that you need to do, and you will do it. And she goes, I'm just going to be here, your advocate. So I was like, you know what, if you can help me get the park, then I'm willing to do what I need to do. So that's how it started.
After the park was built, and I felt empowered, and I felt that I needed to make a difference in our school system.
Vecinos Unidos is our chapters that we have throughout the Central Valley, and Vecinos Unidos means United Neighbors. It's community members that have agreed to employ the mission and values of Dolores Huerta Foundation, and working from a human rights framework, and to protect our rights as workers, as immigrants, as women, and continue to teach people that no matter where they are, that they can make the changes. Dolores Huerta Foundation has our strongest base in South Kern, which are the communities of Lamont, Arvin, and Weed Patch. When we first went in to organize, when we asked them what are the improvements you would like to see in your community, many of their suggestions were really based on infrastructure.
La manera que organizamos, que hacemos juntas caseras y formamos grupos, formamos comités, de ahí los comités se ponen a trabajar, y una de las victorias que la primera que tuvimos aquí en Lamont es de que por muchos años había unas albercas pero estaban cerradas, los vecinos trabajaron, se organizaron y lograron abrir las albercas, lograron pedir que se hicieran banquetas, se hicieron murales, trabajamos para que se hiciera un gimnasio en nuestra escuela, en nuestra comunidad, se acercara a nuestra escuela, y hemos trabajado en muchos proyectos, tanto aquí en Lamont, en Arvin y en Wipesh.
Empezamos a tener voz como comunidad y como residentes de esta comunidad, y aprender que tenemos derechos y que solamente si los pedimos y exigimos que se nos cumpla, es del modo que lo vamos a hacer. Y así es como la fundación nos empezó a enseñar a abogar por nuestra comunidad.
Many people think nonprofit organizations, you provide services, direct services, and we don't. We are direct action. We are focusing on systems changes, on policy changes.
Our mission is to bring justice to our communities and to teach them how to fight for themselves. You know, I remember somebody saying once, if you really want to do something, you've got to get out of the valley. And we're saying, no, we've got to stay here because somebody has to stay here to make the changes and to convince people that they are the ones that can, break down those systems of oppression.
Another core component of the work that we do at the Dolores Huerta Foundation is really focusing on education. Back in 2011, we learned of this local crisis happening. There was a serious push out of Latino and African American students at rates that were 300 and 500% the national norm. And in 1 year alone, over 2,000 students were pushed out of Kern High School District. It was in October of 2014 that we filed a lawsuit against the Kern High School District for implicit bias against Latino and African American students. 3 years later, we've been able to settle this lawsuit with the Kern High School District, which is now going to completely overhaul their disciplinary policies and procedures. In 2016, the Dolores Huerta Foundation started an LGBT equality program, and it's really because although there are LGBT groups in Kern County that are active, we felt that we really needed a policy approach.
We actually have hired paid organizers to go out into the community. One of our programs is to make sure that all of the high schools, they have what they call the Gay Straight Alliance organizations.
I work for the Dolores Huerta Foundation as a staff member, as an LGBT equality organizer, and some of my responsibilities as an organizer are to talk with LGBTQ youth and adults about the issues that are going on in their communities, and to brainstorm with them solutions to the problems. We go into their homes and have house meetings where we talk about community issues, and we hear from them the solutions to the problems that they see in their own lives. So some of the work I do is help co-facilitate our Teens for Equality group, which is a LGBT youth group.
The other is that we just hosted our first ever LGBT Pride March in Bakersfield. The first ever happened.
So we have a long way to go here in Kern County to really work and make sure that we have acceptance and protection and support for our gay community.
Civic engagement really is the core of everything that we do. It's really teaching people that in order to make change, it's really policy changes that they need to focus on. What's happening on the local level? What's happening with school boards, with water boards, city council, board of supervisors, and then what's happening on the state level and the federal level. We provide education to get people involved. And Dolores Huerta teaches us that election day is the most important day of our lives, that it doesn't matter if you're not registered to vote, maybe you're not 18, maybe you're not a citizen, but that all of us can participate in this democracy that we live in. To learn more about the Dolores Huerta Foundation, you can visit our website at doloreshuerta.org. We invite people to come and visit us in our main office in Bakersfield, and we also have satellite offices in Arvin, in Tulare County, and Fresno County as well. We ask for people to come and to volunteer with us, to go knock on doors as we educate voters. We're also working on building our donor base. The majority of our funding does come from foundations. We are really trying to grow our individual donors, where if we could get, several people, hundreds of people, just to give $5 a month, right, that could really go a long way in supporting our work.
The quote that I love, and I've been using this now when I speak, is that Neruda, the poet, said this: they can cut all the flowers, but they can't hold back the spring. And I say the people in the grassroots, they are the ones that are seeding the seeds of justice out there. And those seeds of justice are going to grow, and they're going to become the spring, and they're going to be able to bring justice to the communities and bring justice to our country.
La otra pregunta, ¿se puede?
¡Sí!
¿Se puede?
¡Sí! Dicen que se vuelvo a encontrar la muerte, que por ti la vida me van a quitar.
That just gives you a little sense about why we are so excited. I want to now welcome someone who, through her courageous work as a Stanford student organizer and hunger striker in the 1990s, was instrumental in helping us to found and establish the Center for Comparative Studies in Race and Ethnicity, in particular Chicanx Latinx Studies program. Assistant Dean and Associate Director of El Centro Chicano y Latino, Elvira Prieto.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? ¿Me escuchan bien? Buenas noches. I am so thrilled and honored to be here with you all tonight and to introduce one of my greatest heroes. I'm not going to tell you a list of Dolores' accolades, although there are many and well-deserved. Tonight, I want to tell you a bit about why this moment is especially meaningful and poignant for me. Tonight, I want to tell you why I believe this moment is especially meaningful and poignant for you and for Stanford University. My name is Elvira Prieto, and I grew up in California's Central Valley, working in the grape fields and fruit packing sheds, along with my parents and siblings, in order to subsist and survive as a family. Our survival and livelihood was one that required the literal breaking of our backs under extremely difficult working conditions so that we could put food on our table while we put food on the tables of so many families across this country. My parents were immigrants from Mexico, and they were undocumented for most of my childhood. Our life in the fields was one of physical and emotional pain, exacerbated by a constant fear that our parents could be taken from us at any moment. I came to Stanford as the first woman in my family to go to college, and, as you may know, I was involved in a hunger strike as a sophomore here at Stanford in 1994, a year after Cesar Chavez passed away. Much like it is now, our community at Stanford, as across the nation, experienced great political and social crises, and immigrants and communities of color were the targets and scapegoats for acts of racism, intolerance, and ugliness that showed us the truth of the worst of human nature in our neighbors, our classmates, and the adults who were charged with our education. As students during that time, our decision to participate in a hunger strike as a form of nonviolent action at Stanford was greatly influenced by our feelings of solidarity and personal connection to the work of the United Farm Workers Union that Dolores helped co-found. A year later, in my junior year, I had the honor not only to meet Dolores, but to sit with her on a panel and campus-wide forum about the great boycott issued by the UFW a decade prior. I sat next to Dolores, and I felt her spirit fill me with courage and with grace, while I shared with my peers, staff, and faculty in our university about the heartbreaking and unjust living and working conditions of farm worker families like my own. There are not enough words for me to express how deeply I was humbled and proud to sit with her, to feel the strength of her voice as a woman, and the power of her commitment to the civil rights of those who, like my family, would otherwise be invisible. This same sense of honor, pride, and deep respect, un respeto puro y profundo, for Dolores, for her tenacity, her drive, and deep love for others, has continued in me to this day. I am forever grateful for her undying efforts to dismantle white supremacy and the social and economic injustices and discrimination faced by some of our most vulnerable communities, farm workers, women, and children. Many have described Dolores as a living legend, and indeed she is. She is the heart and soul of a legacy that I wish to embody. I often tell our students how, especially in the darkest moments of self-doubt and despair over the state of our campus or the state of our nation, it is of paramount importance to see ourselves as the legacy of those who have sacrificed, fought, and overcome seemingly insurmountable odds so that we can be at a place like Stanford. It is of paramount importance to see ourselves as the legacy of those who would bring light and speak truth to power. Our efforts to lead, to learn, and to bring our communities to a place of hope and true freedom make us a part of a legacy of great and radical love. We are the product of generations of courageous souls who have given their lives to the service of others. We are the product of generations of courageous souls who have given their lives to the service of others. For the betterment of our humanity, it is with absolute love and joy that I introduce you all to a mujer feminista who represents the legacy that I wish for all of you, just like me, to embody. Stanford Familia, I proudly introduce you to Dolores Huerta.
Thank you very much, Elvira. That was beautiful. That was very beautiful. Gracias. Gracias. Thank you. First of all, I do want to thank the people that are responsible for us being here tonight. And please, I want to have everybody give an applause to Anne and Lorena Kieve, who are the ones that are responsible because of their endowment that we are here this evening. Could I just ask for everybody to give them an applause, please? Thank you. And also to the Center for Comparative Studies for Race and Ethnicity, and of course the director, who we just heard from a few minutes ago, Ms. Jennifer DeVore Brody, and all of the staff that are making this evening possible for us. Please give them an applause also. Thank you. And I think it is somehow fitting that we're here at this great university today, in this moment of time that we find ourselves in. And I think probably a lot of us have asked ourselves, how did we get here? It's almost like Hillary Clinton's book, What Happened, right? But I think a lot of us, especially the people of color in the room, this has been nothing new to us because this situation that we're in, we have been living this situation for many, many decades, and wondering, is it ever going to end? Is it ever going to end? But I think the reason that it's fitting that we're here tonight is because I believe that this here, the educational institutions, the great educational institutions like Stanford, are the solution. I think our educational system has got to be the solution. Because when we look back and we think, how did racism and bigotry, misogyny, homophobia, how did these characteristics enter in our society that they could actually control the politics of the society, how they could actually control the governance of our country? How did we get there? And I think that we, again, people of color, we kind of know. Because we know that when we were going to school as children, that we never saw ourselves in the school books. That we were never taught in those school books what the contributions were of people of color. We were never taught that Native Americans, who were the first slaves in this country, what their contributions were to build the country, besides the fact that we just took their land and never compensated them for it, and have never done anything really meaningful to, render those wrongs that we did to our Native American population. And the African slaves who built the White House, who built the Congress, who built much of the infrastructure of this country, has never been recognized. When you go to the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, you have to remind them it was the slaves that built that memorial, right? And it was the slaves that built the Jefferson Mansion in Virginia. And what the contributions have been of the people from Mexico. Mexicans are great, by the way, okay? And sometimes I like to remind people we're actually sitting on occupied Mexico, right? Right now. And also the people from the Philippines and from Japan and from China and from India, all of these immigrants of color that built the United States of America. And unless we can get those teachings into our school books for our children, then young children of color will always feel like they are second-class citizens because the contributions of their grandparents, great-grandparents, have never been acknowledged. And our white children, our Anglo children, will always have that poison of white supremacy, so that somehow they think their people did it all, and they know that they didn't. So we really have to say that what has blighted the United States of America in terms of our policies, in terms of our culture, has been ignorance. It's just straight ignorance, because people have not been taught. And it's gotten even worse because we don't teach our young people what the contributions are of the labor movement. How did we get the 8-hour day? How do we get the weekends and safety standards, unemployment insurance, disability insurance? All of these things that we take for granted were because there were men and women who actually fought and protested and died so that we could get some of these, labor standards that we just take for granted. So people think that somehow, government just did this for us, that there were not men and women that were out there fighting for this. And when we see, like in today's world, when labor unions and working people are being attacked, and we have this bigotry that we have in our society because we cannot respect people like Elvira's parents and herself, the farm workers that put the food on our table every day. And do we often, when we see that food on our table, do we think there was some farm worker out there yesterday in the cold weather that was doing the planting, that was doing the pruning, the preparation for our food that we're going to be eating? And in the summertime, these farm workers were out there slaving in the hot sun to make sure that we got the food on our table. And yet, we know that they're the least respected, the worst paid people in our society. So this is, I think, something that we really have to take to heart. And if we carry that on further, the type of misogyny that we have, and now we're hearing a lot about women and the inequality of women and the sexual harassment of women, the bullying of women. And again, what do we do in terms of our education to say to everyone and to young boys, women are equal. Women are equal. And you've got to treat every single woman as if she were your sister or your mother. And we still kind of go back to the Walt Disney stories to all of our young girls and say to them, don't worry, because Prince Charming's on his way. And he's going to give you a big kiss, and he's going to wake you up, and you're going to live happily ever after. When we know that that is a total myth, right? Because what happens is Prince Charming might come, give you a big kiss, put you to sleep, and then baby's daddy is gone. Or if you're an older woman, who knows, you might get traded in for a trophy wife that looked like you looked like 40 years ago. And so these are the things that I think that as educators, we have to start saying we've got to change the way that we educate our students. And especially our young women have got to be taught that nobody is going to protect you, nobody's going to support you. You're going to have to do that for yourself. And when we think of the animal kingdom and we think who are the most ferocious, is it the male or the female lions, for instance, right? We know it's always the female because they have to take care of the children, right? The babies. And somehow we in our society, in our very civilized Western society, somehow we have, kind of been dumbed down and to say that women are weak. And I love to quote Coretta Scott King, by the way, when she says that we will never have peace in the world until women take power. But I'm going to alter that quote a little bit. I'm just going to say, I don't think we will have peace in the world until feminists take power. And when I say that, and we want to describe what is a feminist, well, a feminist is somebody who stands up for women's reproductive rights, women's right to abortion, yes. We have to normalize that. I have 11 children. My daughter Juanita likes dogs instead of children. And that's her right? And of course, somebody who stands up for LGBT rights, for people's rights to marry whomever they want, to fall in love with whomever they want. And I love to quote Benito Juárez, the great indigenous president of Mexico. His saying was, el respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. Respecting other people's rights is peace. Women's rights to their own body, LGBT rights to fall in love with or marry whomever they want, that is their human right, and we have to respect it. So feminists are people who respect LGBT rights very, very much, okay? And then also workers' rights. Of course, respecting our planet to make sure that we do not continue destroying our planet, that we save our planet for future generations. And then, of course, somebody that stands up for immigrants' rights. So that means that all the men in this room are feminists, okay? So let's give an applause. And so as feminists, we have to take power. But let me go back to that in a minute, but then I want to talk about immigration. We know that is a very hot topic right now. And I just have to remind people, when you cross the border without documents, you are not conducting a criminal act. It's a civil violation. Because when you cross the border, you're not hurting anybody. People are coming here to look for a better way of life. But they have criminalized that so that they can put people in jail. And so that we can continue feeding our prison population. And as you all know, we have more people in prison in the United States than they do in India or China. Even those populations are billions of people. We're only millions. But we have more people in prison. And so they continue to do this and then privatizing the prisons so that we can make money off of make profits out of the people that are in the prison system. And if we look back, and I'm sure that maybe all of us in this room, unless we're Native Americans, our people came from somewhere. So this has been a nation of immigrants and continues to be a nation of immigrants. And so we've got to continue to say we've got to fight for immigration reform. And just as it has always been in the United States of America, every single immigrant group that came here to the United States got the right of residency and got the right of citizenship. And not having to go through the complicated hoops that they have made today to make immigration so impossible for people to bring in their loved ones from other countries. And of course, now with Trump, he's making it worse. And when we think about immigration, we don't think of permanent solutions. Why do people want to come to the United States of America when they live in beautiful places like Guatemala or Chiapas or some of these Central American, Latin American countries? Why do they want to come to the United States? And are we doing anything to help them? No. Now, when we consider, and I just want to make a comparison here, after World War II, after Germany and Japan, they lost the war. So what did we do in the United States? We had the Marshall Plan. And we gave those countries jillions of tax dollars of the United States of America to rebuild those countries. So the people that were our enemies and some of those corporations that were in the Japan war effort, hey, who were they? The people that we financed to build their corporations and to make their country strong, people like Toyota, right? And all of these other auto manufacturers whose automobiles we buy. So we gave them money to build their own economy. And we did the same thing with Germany, with Volkswagen, et cetera, et cetera. What do we do with Latin American countries? We have economic colonization. We want to take over their economies. I'm going to just say one thing, or one product, that all of us, every single one of us uses, bananas. How many millions of bananas do we eat every day? Do the people in Guatemala get the money? Or Honduras? Who gets the money that we pay for bananas? It goes to our American corporations like Dole and Chiquita Banana, but the people that actually produce the bananas in those countries do not get the money. This is what I mean by economic colonization. So wouldn't it be awesome if instead of trying to take over the economies of those countries where the people remain poor, that we actually went in there and helped them develop their own economies? Wouldn't that be better? And then that way people wouldn't have to come to the United States of America in the first place. They could actually live in their own, because in all of those countries they have a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of infrastructure work. But we don't do anything to help them do that. Instead, our corporations go in there and take it over. And so these are things that we have to think about. We have to kind of change our role in these other countries. And yes, we have to continue to work to be able to make sure that the immigrants that are here in the United States are actually respected for the work that they do. Taking care of children, taking care of people in nursing homes, doing all of this very, very hard work and actually getting paid very little for it. And this is, of course, what we're trying to do with my foundation, the Dolores Huerta Foundation. We're actually trying to go in there and organize, as you saw in the video a minute ago, so that some of those folks over there, they can actually take care of their own solutions and their own problems, and they're the ones that actually have the knowledge and they can do it. But it takes an awful lot of work because we have to do this very tedious grassroots organizing, going family by family, house by house, to really let people know that they have the power to make it happen. And I think this is the one thing that we have to understand in our United States of America, that we have the power to make the changes. And that if we do not get out there, and if we do not get out there and make the changes, nothing's going to happen, everything is going to stay the same. And I think right now we're in this critical moment in our country that if we do not, every single one of us, if we do not act, that everything is going to stay the same. I actually think we need to build our own wall, but our wall has to be in the U.S. Congress to make sure that whatever comes out of the White House, that if there's any way that we can do it, that we have to stop what is coming out of the White House. So I know that just recently, I think it was today or yesterday, that Trump made the statement about having people come, and I'm going to quote him. Okay, these are not my words. These are our president's words about people coming to the United States from those shithole countries. Okay, these are the countries, of course, that have been exploited and have been colonized over the years. You know, sometimes when I think of, I remember going to Spain once, and I was in this one building that was once the home of a duke. And what was on the wall, the wallpaper was gold. And I thought to myself, that gold came from Mexico. You know, that gold came from Mexico. And this is what they did with the gold. They put it on a wall. They made wallpaper out of the gold. You know, now if we took all of the gold that they took from Mexico, and they took all of the wealth, and they took all of the diamonds that come out of Africa, you know, and if somehow all of that wealth was returned to the quote unquote shithole countries, the countries would not be poor, right? This is part of the exploitation that I'm talking about. You know, when somehow the wealth of the countries is not given back to the people. But then we kind of have to think about our own country. We have to think about this tax reform bill that they just passed, right? Where the corporations are going to be have their taxes reduced. What is it, from 35% to 21%? When we think of the people that are homeless on the streets of the United States of America, and we hear about these Fortune 500 corporate executives that are making multi-millions of dollars a year, multi-millions of dollars a year. Really, I mean, I don't care how much money you have, you can only eat 3 meals a day. You can only wear one suit of clothes a day. So what are they going to do with all of that money? I mean, we know that money is something that is affiliated to power, but really, what kind of a conscience can people have when we see that we have so many homeless people on our streets and they don't have anywhere to live? When we see families that have to work 2 jobs just to try to pay the rent and put the food on the table. I mean, I think this is total corruption. And somehow we have to find ways to address it and ways to change it. And, you know, there was a Spanish philosopher named José Ortega y Gasset. And he wrote a book called The Revolution of the Masses. It's a very small book. I think it's less than 100 pages. But the whole thesis of his book was that if you do not have an educated citizenry, then what you will have in a country is mob rule. If the citizens of a country are not educated, then the greedy and the powerful will rule the country. And I think that's where we're at today. I know a lot of people are comfortable, so they feel, okay, well, there's no need to make that fight because I'm okay. You know, I've got an education, I've got a good job, you know, I'm comfortable. But then when we look at the other people in our country that are not able to make it, then we think that there's something wrong. And I think that we've got to think, it's not enough for me to be comfortable. I've actually got to get out there and make sure that the rest of the people in this country are also comfortable. That it is wrong that you have these people, these Fortune 500 people that, you know, they commit all of these, and I'm going to call it corrupt acts, which are really criminal acts, and they don't go to jail for it. There's no accountability, and yet we have so many people that are poor and are not able to make it. I think this is totally wrong. So, and I think it's wonderful that we have got the resistance movement, that we have got people going out on the streets, that we've got women going out there and fighting for their rights. But you know what? If we don't take those marches, if we don't take those protests down to the ballot box, it doesn't make any difference. Because the only way the only way that we're going to make those changes is we're going to be able to have to elect people to office that are really going to make the changes. And it's incumbent, I think, upon all of us, and not just look at the congressional level, and not just look at our state senate or the state assembly. Let's come down to our school board levels. You know, I think in the video we talked a little bit about, you saw about the work that we're doing on education. We're like in 7 different school districts right now in the Central Valley. And by the way, the Central Valley of California, 40% of the districts that have the highest suspensions of Latino and African American children are in the Central Valley of California. That's where it's at. We recently started a new campaign in a town called California City. It's kind of funny that that's that name, California City. And the reason we had to go in there is because the suspension rate, you're not going to believe this, the suspension rate of African American students in that school district, the Mojave School District, is 81%. 8 out of 10 of the African American students are being suspended and expelled from school. And this is like a direct path from the school to prison pipeline. And this is going on, and not only here in California, it's going on in Texas, it's happening in Arizona, it's happening in Chicago, it's happening in New York State. You know, using the school system to be able to put people in prison. And it is so wrong. So somehow we've got to get in there, we've got to take control, we've got to say this is wrong. And just because it's not happening in our backyard, but it's happening in somebody else's backyard, and the people are suffering for this. And so I do believe, as I started to say when I first started to speak here, that I think that saving our country is going to start right here. It's going to start with education. It's going to start here with Stanford. It's going to start with UCLA and all of our public educational schools. And also the other thing is to make sure that we save our educational system. Now, I know Stanford is a private university, but when we think of our high school systems and our grammar school system, we've got to make sure that they remain public educational systems. And we've got to put the money into those systems, the money that they need. You know, we were very fortunate that we were able to pass Proposition 55. Do you all remember what that was in the last election? Proposition 55? Anybody remember Proposition 30? Okay, I'll remind you. Because you all voted for it. Okay, we passed it. And, and what this was a tax on our millionaires in California. So if you're a millionaire in California, you have to pay 3% more in state taxes. If you make $500,000, you have to pay 2% more. If you make $250,000, you pay 1% more in state taxes. Well, those measures that we passed in the last 2 of general election brought in over $9 billion to our state. So give yourself an applause for that one too. Thank you. And so for this next election, we're going to have another tax measure on it. This is going to be a little bit harder, okay? It's going to be called Make It Fair. And we're going to be coming to you, we're going to be asking for your signatures. And what this one will do, it will make sure that we get rid of the loopholes on property taxes. And not your homeowner, because actually after Proposition 13, some of you will remember that one. That was a proposition that was passed that lowered property taxes for homeowners. But guess what's happened since that passed? Homeowners' property taxes have been climbing. But for the big guys like Chevron, Disneyland, you know what? Their property taxes have not climbed at all. And they have all of these loopholes that they don't have to pay property taxes the way that they should, the commercial property taxes. So this is what Make It Fair is about. Make It Fair, which hopefully will be on the ballot in this next election, means that all of the commercial property tax owners, like Chevron, like Disney, will pay their fair share of property taxes. So that's going to be a rough one, but we're going to ask people to really look about that. And that, again, will bring us probably about $11 billion into our state revenues. So, you know, when California, before Proposition 13, we were number 1 or 2 in the whole country in terms of education. Now, we were down, I think, to like next to Mississippi. Luckily, because of the Prop 30 and Prop 55, we climbed up a little bit. So I think we're like that number 45 or 46 in the country right now. And so when we think of this great state of California, all of the great things that come out of California, that go east, and, all of the innovations that come out of California, that we need to make sure we get more money into our educational system. And I think it is a sin that our teachers are not paid what they should be paid. So let's give all of our teachers an applause. And that you can actually make more money coming out of high school and become a correctional officer in our prisons than you can as a teacher, who has to go to school and get a bachelor's degree or a master's degree if they're going to be a high school teacher, and yet you can get more money if you're a prison guard in our society. And so I think that this is extremely wrong, and we've got to kind of just change our focus, and we've got to start demanding. And then when we think about, and I know Bernie Sanders was advocating, I'm sure a lot of people were Bernie supporters, that yes, we should have free tuition for all of our students in the United States of America. Because why is it that these other countries in Scandinavia, teeny little Cuba, who has all of these economic sanctions against them by the United States of America, that every single person in Cuba can go to college free, that you can become a doctor or an attorney in Cuba free of charge. In fact, there are U.S. citizens that go to Cuba to become doctors because they can't afford to become doctors in the United States of America. Now, if Cuba can do this, if a country like Norway can do this, of the Scandinavian countries, I'll use the S word, socialism, right? All these socialist countries, if they can somehow educate all of their residents free, why can't the United States of America? And then there's another issue. When I talked about Norway, I thought, wow, this is a small, teeny country. And I saw in the New York Times, this was several years ago, that they had like a multi-billion-dollar surplus in their country. I thought, where did they get all that money? This teeny little country like Norway. Guess what? They own their oil. I thought, wow. We don't own our oil in the United States of America. I come from Bakersfield, California. Bakersfield, California, we supply about 60% of the oil for the state of California. But we don't own the oil. These oil companies own the oil, right? And so this is why, as long as we do not own our natural resources, we're never going to be able to have enough money for the people of the country. So, and I think that's something we don't think about. We don't even consider it. So maybe this is what's wrong with our capitalistic system, because somehow we have a system that allows these people to have all of these multi-billions of dollars in salaries, and that they keep all of this wealth, and somehow it's not getting down to the people. But, we don't challenge that. And I think we have to start thinking about how do we challenge that. And I think that this moment that we're in right now, when I do believe that the majority of the people of our country are angry, and they're upset, and how do we get into this moment? And we are not taught economics in our school systems, just like we're not taught about the contributions of people of color or women or LGBT people to our society. How do we get to this moment? And so I think that when we get over this moment that we're in, and we will overcome this moment that we're in, that we really got to start questioning everything. We have to start questioning everything. We have to start questioning our economic system. It's not fair the way that our economic system is working, that it is leaving so many people behind. And hardworking people. These are not people they're not just out there doing nothing. They're out there working very hard. And I think another thing that we have to think about in the future is that as we see more and more robotics taking over, and I know we're real close to the Silicon Valley here, so what are people going to do? Don't we have to start promoting more art so that every single person, if you're not going to get a job in a factory, that somehow maybe you can become an artist, like Fabiana Rodriguez, who's here with us today, or in theater, or in dance, or in music, so that maybe we will have like a cultural revolution, so that everybody, because we know people do not work, this is not good. Work is healthy, but we have to do the kind of work that we love to do. And so we have to start pushing, I think. We have to start pushing for arts, we have to start pushing for culture, we have to start looking ahead. What are people going to do when so many jobs are being taken away from us from robots, okay? I mean, and the thing is that many of you here, you are here in the place where these innovations are born. You are close to the place where innovations are born. And so we have to think, okay, let's step outside of ourselves and let's just look ahead at what's going to come into the future and think, what is it that we're going to do to make sure that all of this happens? And in the meantime, while most of you are doing that heavy thinking and that visionary stuff, we will be down at the grassroots level, organizing the people at the bottom to make sure that they get the positions that they need, and that they will be able to take power in their own communities. I just want to mention also, I know they showed the film Dolores here last night. It's a documentary produced by Carlos Santana, the great musician, and it's going to be on public broadcasting system on Independent Lens at the end of March, March the 27th. So if you didn't get to see the movie, please see the movie, okay? It's a documentary about my life, and I think that you'll like it. So I'm going to step down after we're going to have a conversation. So I just want to do a couple of vivas, and I'm going to ask you all a question, okay? And you're going to have a chance to ask us questions. So we're coming up against Martin Luther King's birthday, and so we have to remember his values. And also, next year will also be the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Robert Kennedy. And remembering Robert Kennedy's values also, that this is a man with wealth that was able to come down to Appalachia, come down to Bedford-Stuyvesant with the people, African-American people, and come down to Delano for the farm workers, okay? So remembering the people that are in need, and what can we do to make sure that we can help them and empower the people who need to be empowered. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to do a viva for Martin Luther King. I want you to say viva, okay? And one for RFK, and then one for Cesar Chavez. And just say viva, all right? Okay, I'll do it first. You just say viva. Viva Dr. Martin Luther King! Viva! Okay, a little bit louder. Viva Robert F. Kennedy! Viva! Viva Cesar Chavez! Viva! All right, and then I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to say, who's got the power? We do! And I want you to yell, we've got the power. And I'm going to say, what kind of power? And I want you to say, people power, right? But I want you to say it so loud that the neo-Nazis can hear us. Okay, so let's go. Who's got the power? What kind of power? Okay, are we going to go out there? Are we going to work for justice? What do we say? We're going to say, yes, we can. And in Spanish, that's si se puede. Let's do an organized hand clap. Everybody together. Let's go. Si se puede. Thank you very much. No, you're welcome. Thank you. Okay, good. Thank you.
Catch my breath. I'm inviting Dolores to take a seat now, and I'd like to bring Professor Al Camarillo onto the stage, and he'll begin asking a few questions. And I want to remind you all, our wonderful audience, that if you need a card, if you want to ask a question, you may do so. And then at the very end of the program, you may come and have a picture. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, Dolores, thank you so much for being here. Every time I see you, every time I hear you talk, you are a constant inspiration, as you were tonight, and for all of us. I've had the great honor of knowing Dolores for many, many years. And as a historian of the Mexican-American experience and comparative studies of race and ethnicity, I'll tell you tonight, Dolores Huerta stands at the center stage of the pantheon of the greatest leaders of social reform movements in the 20th century. We're so proud, Dolores, to have you back on campus again. Let me start with this question, because I bet this will be of real importance, and I'm eager to hear it too. I've heard it in different ways from you over the years. An incredible career that's nearly 60 years, starting a a labor union from farm workers, the first successful labor union for farm workers in the nation's history, and then going on to be involved in social movements after you leave the union. Looking back at this career, what were the guiding principles or the values that kept you going all of these years, decade after decade after decade?
Well, actually, it was the other way around. Both Satsad and myself were part of community organizing first. We were with the Community Service Organization, which had a chapter in San Jose, by the way, and we were able to change a lot of significant laws in California, and like one of them was to make sure that people who were legal residents of the state that were not citizens could get public assistance, because before that they couldn't get public assistance. If you had a green card, you couldn't get public assistance, so you had to be a U.S. citizen. And so we were able to change that law way back in 1961 to make that happen. Then we passed laws for disability insurance for farm workers, that you could get your driver's license in Spanish, that you could vote, or in your ethnic language, that you could vote in Spanish. And so those are all the laws and the work that we were doing before we started the farm workers movement. So it was kind of the other way around. We started doing community organizing first, and then we went on to organize the farm workers union from there.
And there's many highlights in your life of the victories, right? Whether it be the farm workers or later. And those are the bright spots, right? And they're sprinkled across time. But there were some dark days back when you and Cesar Chavez and the other leaders launched the UFW against great challenges, against great odds. And there were dark days, right? There was challenge after challenge by the growers, by the law enforcement. How did you keep yourself going, keep on going as you are today, despite those challenges, despite those dark days?
Well, I think the one thing, and that actually I didn't answer your first question, I think the one thing that keeps me committed to organizing is when you see that people have power and that people go out there and in their communities, they can take on the challenges and that they can actually change them, that they can change the policies, they can change the practices, you know. And I think that's what keeps me going, because when you look back and you think of all of the laws that we were able to change and all of the leadership that came out from once people started taking those actions and taking direct action, and when I say the nonviolent direct action, that you can see that you have a lot of leadership that emerges from that work. And so I feel sometimes it's like a magic wand. You know, you go into community, you have an organizer, you train that organizer, and they make all of these great things happen. And so you want to keep doing it, you know, because there's so much need out there, and you know that the people themselves have the power to do it, and that by doing this grassroots organizing that was taught to us by Fred Ross Sr., by the way, he's an Anglo, a Caucasian, and I like to say that a Caucasian, a gringo, was the father of the Chicano movement. Fred Ross Sr., and he's the one that taught us how to do this model of grassroots organizing. And so when you see that people are empowered, and you know that there's so much need out there, you want to empower as many people as you can. So obviously, you want to try to reach out and touch as many communities as you can, because you know people can do the work. Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of undergraduates. How many undergraduates out there? All right, a lot of you, majority of you. Mm-hmm. If you had to give a couple pieces of advice to these young people, and we're living in extraordinary times, given your commitment to social reform across generations now, if you had to give a little bit of advice to these students, what would be those little bits of advice?
Well, I think to them and to everyone else, I just say, and I know people come to college because you want to have a comfortable living, but think of leaving a legacy of justice, okay? As I said before, you know, people that have millionaires and they leave money to their children and the children start fighting over it and then they hate each other. So in all of the work that we do, please have that justice lens on. Whatever you're going to do in your life, you know, think about how is it going to help other people? How is it going to make the world a lot better? And even if you go into the corporate world, because I know this is kind of a corporate university here, okay, but, you know. How to influence those corporations to make sure that they have also a social justice philosophy and a social justice lens, because we're only on this earth for a short time, and we don't get to come back, at least unless you believe in like the Indian philosophies and but otherwise we're only here for a short time, so you want to make the world better while you're here, whatever you can do with your life. And I think that sometimes we think, well, I don't have time, my life is too busy, but I think when you get out there and you start helping other people, whatever your personal problems are, they become diminished, because you don't have time to think about your personal problems, right? And your personal problems are going to take care of themselves eventually. But when you're out there working to help other people, to working on a cause, on a mission, whether it's climate change or helping our LGBT brothers, our transgender folks, our people of color, going out there to fight to save our planet now that we have global warming. If you get out there and help on these causes, then I think it really fulfills your life, but you know that you did something that is going to be lasting. Cesar Chavez, when he died, his annual salary was like $6,000 a year, if you can believe that, But he left a legacy of justice, and that's, I think, what we have to think. What is my legacy going to be? Is my legacy going to be one of justice? Was I able to make a change? And even if you think, well, my contribution is too small, it's actually the contributions of a lot of us when we all put it together that really makes the changes that need to be made.
Well said, those real words of wisdom. And it's not so much that very few people here tonight or anywhere across America are not going to be able to commit to the kind of life that you lived for social reform. But they can do something, right?
Exactly.
They can do something within the context of their universe, right? Of their locality, their community, that'll make a change, because it's cumulative, obviously. And you are a prime example of that cumulative social change. Now, another question, different question. Now, most Americans don't know that when Dolores and Cesar Chavez, as co-founders of the Union, in the early 1960s, through the 70s, built a movement that crossed boundaries, ethnicity, race, gender, class. And it was, in fact, if you see this film, it's beautifully portrayed in this documentary. I really urge you to see it. It was necessary for you to do that, and you were leading the charge for the Union to make it a center of all these crossing boundaries, right? And it was necessary for you to do that to make it successful eventually. I guess the question I'm asking now is, it was important for you and the others to do that for the Union then. Is it important now to do that? We call it intersectionality, right? Across race and gender and sexuality, et cetera, et cetera. Is it a time when we have to take that to heart even more so, perhaps?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when we think of the movement of Black Lives Matter, for instance, how important is that all of us respond to that, that we all, support that movement. And I hope that people see the documentary 13, if you haven't seen that, because we wonder, how did we get to this place here where we criminalize people of color? I think that documentary really tells it really well. And also the documentary about James Baldwin's life, I think that's another important one. Yeah, I think that we have to stand up for each other, and because in order to really change what we need to change in our country, and when we think about our country, the United States of America, because we are the most powerful country in the world, whatever we do here is going to influence every other country, So we have to think about, how do we make our country better so that we can make the whole world better? And we could only do that if we all come together, because when you think about it, we are the majority, people of color. Do you know people of color is 75% of the world? Anglo people are only 25%, Caucasians 25% of the world. So we are the majority. We're the majority in the United States of America also. So when we put together people of color, we put together all of the feminists, male and female feminists, and we put together, and I like to say, white men of conscience, right? Okay? Then, we are the majority, so that we can actually make these things happen, but we've got to work together. And I think you all know there's a Women's March coming on January 20th. So if you didn't remember that, I'm just reminding everybody that there is going to be a Women's March on January the 20th, and so we want to encourage everybody to go to the Women's March, and if there's not going to be one where you live, organize one, okay? You have a week or so to do it to make sure that we have everybody out there marching for equality for women and the fair treatment of women.
On that topic, when you co-founded the union, largely unprecedented that a woman could lead a major labor union, a successful labor union, and by extension, a movement, because it was more than just a union, it was a social movement. And I know you encountered all kinds of gender discrimination, and you had to confront obstacles that were put in your way, attitudes that prevailed at the time and still prevail that didn't see you as an equal, right? Can you tell the women and men, I underscore men, here tonight, how do we, and we know, as you've mentioned in your comments, and we're so aware of the nature of this gender inequality that is persistent, a persistent problem in our society. How do we confront these obstacles as we face them as individuals?
Well, I think it's something that we have to work very hard on. I mean, I think women have to stand up, and women have to stand up, and women have to insist that they be treated as equals. And I know sometimes it's very hard for women because we don't like to create conflict, okay? But even Gandhi said that sometimes you can't make change unless you create conflict. And I know sometimes we have to do it in a nice way and in an organized way. And the other two, in terms of women taking power, I want to just say to the women out here, a lot of times we women feel, well, I'm not really prepared enough to take that position, or I don't feel like I'm qualified. Just do it like the guys do it, pretend that you know, and learn on the job. So I think a lot of organizing, and of course when we work with the grassroots community, people that really don't have a formal education, and we're trying to, convince them that they have the power to change things, And the one thing I think is just overcoming fear. And I think that's for all of us, because we have to overcome this fear that I might get into trouble, or people are going to criticize me if I take this stand, if I defend people in my community who are gay or transgender. But we've got to overcome that fear, and we've got to realize that we do have a lot of power just within ourselves. And what people would say to us, how do you organize the farm workers? They don't speak English. They don't have any money. They're not citizens. How can you convince them to come together and organize? And the thing that we said to them, it's the same thing I'm saying to you right now. We have the power, but it's in our persons. And each person, each one of us has the power, but we've got to come together to make it happen, because no one can do it by themselves, Okay. And to the women, I want to say, if you're in a situation out there where you're not being treated equally, tell the people where you work, especially so your boss will know, I belong to the Feminist Majority, National Organization for Women. I belong to the Me Too movement, so they'll know that you're not alone, okay? They'll know that you've got a whole bunch of women out there that are going to back you up. And yes, we do have to, like I said before, women have to stand up and fight for ourselves. And men, we just have to say to all of the men, you've got to step back and give women an opportunity, right? And sometimes that's hard to do, because I know everybody is, we're all looking at our own careers, our own progression that we want, increasing our status. But sometimes we have to say to them, okay, could you mind just stepping aside and letting a woman, take your place or take the place that you're striving for.
Right.
And I know it's hard to do. It's easy to say.
So I'm going to sneak in one more question before I read some questions from members of the audience. Elvira Prieto, we heard her talk about we all stand on the shoulders of other people that came before us and opened the doors. You've done an amazing job over such a long career of pushing those doors open, of creating opportunity, of inspiring generations of people to take action. I don't think I've ever asked you this before. who were your heroes? You mentioned Benito Juarez. Were there other heroes? Fred Ross, I know that he was a hero of yours, who was starting the CSO. Were there others in your life that you looked to for inspiration?
Well, my Girl Scout leader. Her name was Catherine Kemp, and I was a Girl Scout from the time I was 8 to the time I was like 8 to 18 years old. And I think she helped me, get the confidence to be able to speak because I was very shy. And then in the feminist movement, women like, of course, Gloria Steinem, who's all of our hero, but Eleanor Smil, who's the head of the feminist majority. And she's the one, for those of you that saw the movie, that she was able to get me to go from the position of being anti-abortion to understand that that's a woman's human right, And because of my Catholicism, like so many of the people that we work with, I was kind of stuck in that place, And it took me time to be able to understand that. And I think that's important. I think faith is important. I think it's important that we have faith, but I also think that it's important that we not let religion dominate our lives or dominate how we vote, especially. We should not have any religious leaders that how we have to vote. So, those are important things.
Good, thank you. So let me read a question from a very young member of the audience, Mariana. She says, hello, Dolores Huerta. I am a student at, I think it's Synap School in Menlo Park, or something like that. I'm not sure, I can't read it quite. I want to be a change maker just like you someday. And she asked a couple questions, but I'll mention this one. What main advice would you give young kids like me to keep going?
Well, I think just, first of all, get started. Get started and look at, even in your own school, to make sure that the children are being treated fairly. Make sure that the things that your teachers are telling you are really true. And ask your teachers, what are you telling us about people of color, I'm going to mention the word, I don't know what grade this person is in, but there's a great documentary about a young black man named Emmett Till. If you haven't seen that documentary about Emmett Till, everybody needs to see that documentary about this young man. He was, I think, a teenager who went to Mississippi and was killed, murdered, because they said he whistled at a white woman. Some people say he just looked at her, I don't know. But he was killed when he was just a young man, a teenager. He was from Chicago. And I think that is a really great movie that all children need to see. And also to make sure that you ask your teachers to teach you something about immigrants and the contributions that they have to this country. I think students can make demands of their teachers, and also about women, what women's contributions have been. And also run for office in your own school, and see make sure that girls are being given the same amount of money for sports as the boys are getting, And that's actually Title IX, and there's a lot of violations of that throughout our country, because a lot of times girls don't get the money for sports that boys do. So, just to start looking at your own school and make sure that people are treated fairly and equally.
Good advice to Mariana. Mariana, we're going to check in on you and make sure you're doing some of this stuff that Dolores is saying. Here's another question that I know that you have tons of thoughts about, and it is a critical, important question for us today, more so than ever, I think. Do you think that unions can be revived in the context of the gig economy, the current economy?
Well, I think unions have to be revived because labor unions are just the fabric of our country. And the thing is this, that labor unions, this is the only way that we can really redistribute the wealth in our society, when people come together as workers. And when you think of what is a union is an organization of workers. That's all it is. Like all of the employers have their organizations, the Manufacturers Association, the growers have the Farm Bureau Federation, the Wine and Tree Fruit League, the Westland Farmers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of the employers have organizations that they belong to. Workers only have one, and that is a union. And that union represents them on the job, in terms to make sure they're treated fairly on the job, but also represent them at the state capitol in Sacramento or in Washington, D.C. So workers need an organization that represents them, and that is a labor union. So when people say, well, labor unions are a special interest, they're not. I mean, the majority of the people in the country are workers. That is not a special interest, right? That has got to be a very vital part of our society. Organized workers, workers having the right to have an organization, it's got to be. Not only that, it's a bedrock of our society, because if you do not have labor unions, you do not have a middle class. If you do not have a middle class, you do not have a democracy. Okay, so labor unions are very much a part of making sure that we have democracy in our country.
Good. Thank you, Dolores. We'll make this the final question. There's kind of two parts to it. In the documentary, Dolores, which again we urge you to see soon, you say that revolution starts with love. Do you mean self-love or love for others? And then there's the additional part to this. Also, talk about the relationship between love and your tireless commitment for social justice. And I did remember to see that, and it struck me that one of the first things you say in the documentary is about love. So this question is asking you to elaborate a little bit more on that.
Well, I think self-love is really important. And when I say self-love, it means that also giving ourselves the power and the confidence that we need to be able to help other people. And to empower other people, because it's not like doing for them, but helping people do for themselves. I think that's really important. You know, it's not patronage, it's, you know, empowering people to be able to act on their own 2 feet. That's one thing. And when you love people, you know, outside of yourself, that means that you love them enough to really do whatever you can, again, to make sure that they have power. And that takes a lot of a commitment, because it's hard, you know. When you're trying to empower other people and not patronize them, it's almost like when you're a parent, you know. When you're a parent, you're scolding, you're pushing, you're lifting them up, you're lifting up your children, right? And this is what you have to do with other people. And to give them the space so that they can grow, but giving them the opportunities and the resources that they need so that they can stand on their own 2 feet. It's kind of complicated. I know it sounds kind of complicated, but also when people don't agree with you and are going against you and what you're doing, it's kind of easy to, you know, also become a hater, right? And I don't think we want to become haters, so we have to have a lot of patience, and maybe people sometimes they're not ready for our message yet. And so we have to have the patience to continually trying to, you know, as empowering them, also trying to raise their consciousness, trying to educate them. And so that means we have to have a lot of patience and not give up on people and not give up on ourselves either.
So it's obviously as well the love for justice, right, that has driven you all these years. And we are so fortunate tonight to have you here. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to go off script. The evening is not complete without another Viva. So I'm going to tell you to get up on your feet. Don't forget, this is Dolores Huerta up here. I mean, you got to show some enthusiasm, folks.
Thank you.
Are you ready? Que viva Dolores Huerta!
Thank you.
All right, you're going to join me else, something else in a movement. Clap. It starts out slow and it ends fast. Ready? Dolores Huerta!
If people want to know about our work that we're doing, our grassroots work that we're doing down the Central Valley, and actually our model can be used anywhere in the world, please go to DoloresHuerta.org. And to join our social justice movement, you can just say dhf.org, okay, on your phones.
Yes, there are flyers.
And we have flyers. Oh, hi, Mary.
Let me get a flyer for the Dolores
That's Mary Bernier, one of our grassroots organizers who spent a lot of time in New York City and out in the fields. Hi, Mary Bernier. And Mary has flyers out there. And also, my son is running for Congress. His name is Emilio Huerta. California, and he's running as a Democrat against a Republican down there in the Bakersfield, Fresno area. So people want to come down and help us knock doors in the Central Valley. We want to do like a little Freedom Summer, like Dr. King did, and invite people to come on down and knock on the doors there so we can get people out to vote and convince them. We're doing that, but we could always use more help. And people want to contribute to the Dolores Huerta Foundation so we could expand our organizing model, which is really Fred Ross's organizing model that we continue to use with grassroots organizing. We want to just thank you for all of your help and your attention. And again, Anne and Lauren, thank you very much. Thank you for making this possible. Thank you.
The penultimate event is just to present Ms. Huerta with 2 awards. The first is a plaque commemorating this lecture from CCSRE, and the second requires that I ask Fabiana Rodriguez, who's done a commissioned work of art that you've been looking at this evening, and she's going to come up and present the actual piece to Dolores. So I'd like you to come over, and Fabiana to please come up to the stage. This is your plaque.
Oh my goodness, thank you.
A box for it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Dolores, I want to say a few words. So first, people may not know, but Dolores is an art lover. Since the UFW was formed, Dolores was working with people like Barbara Carrasco and many artists in the Chicano movement. And so as an artist that was inspired by your leadership, by your feminism, I created this piece for you to first talk about that what we do to the planet and what we do to the workers. You know, people forget that climate change is caused because of big ag. And that farm workers are frontline workers in the extractive economy. And when Dolores fights for the rights of farm workers, she's also fighting for the rights of the planet. And so in this piece, you have Mother Earth who's hugging the world because Dolores fights for the people who are most connected to the land. And we have to understand that our fight for justice is also a fight against climate change, and that the extractive economy hurts the planet, it hurts workers, it hurts women, it hurts animals. And also, people may not know this, Dolores is a vegetarian, and she loves animals. And so in the piece, I also showed the Xoloscuincle, which is one of the favorite, the Xoloscuincle. Dolores loves Mexico too, as she said, and the Xoloscuincle is such a traditional dog. It was Diego and Frida's favorite dog. And also, you know, the Central Valley is where 1/4 of the food in this country is grown. So it's so meaningful that you fight for workers in the Central Valley. And then finally is that, you know, Dolores loves the butterfly, and in the corner there's the symbol for the butterfly with 2 faces, because just like monarch butterflies travel without borders, people will always move without borders. And then that finally, just like butterflies, farm workers are pollinators. They pollinate the food for us. So Dolores, this is for you. Thank you for being inspirational, and thank you for just being so supportive to artists.
Thank you, Fabiana.
So beautiful. Thank you to everyone. If you would like a picture, you can line up on this side of the auditorium. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Al, and of course, thank you, Ms. Huerta.